This episode of Around the Oval is brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. Hey, Ohio State fans, Alex Gleitman here, back with another edition of Around the Oval, brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. It is Big Ten Championship Week. Ohio State will head to Indianapolis this weekend to take on the Northwestern Wildcats, the winners of the Big Ten West Division, on big noon kickoff Saturday, noon Eastern on Fox. To preview this week's game, we bring in Jay Sharman of Lake the Post. Jay, thanks for coming on. Appreciate your time this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's a privilege to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're going to break down this matchup between the Wildcats and the Buckeyes. As you can see in my little Zoom background here, this was the stadium 2 years ago. It will be a little bit different this year. The end zones might be the same at Lucas Oil Field in Indianapolis, but there will not be that many fans in attendance. But before we get into that, want to talk a little bit about the Wildcats season thus far. They've had, a tremendous year after going 3-9 last year, really turned things around. Obviously, Pat Fitzgerald just does a tremendous job year in and year out, in my opinion, doing more with less due to some like academic standards and things of that and resources, things of that nature. But they went 6-1 in an all Big Ten schedule this year. Their lone loss coming to Michigan State a few weeks back. Just tell us a little bit, what are your thoughts on, Northwestern season? Was this something that was expected by fans? Was this something that was kind of a complete surprise? I mean, I personally thought with a veteran team and some guys, that transferred in and whatnot, and just knowing Pat Fitzgerald's team's always going to put on a solid defense. I thought they'd be pretty good this year and have a chance at the West. I didn't know if they'd go 6-1 and win the West. What are your thoughts on how the season's played out for Northwestern so far?
Yeah, man, if I had to describe Northwestern's, the expectations were cautiously optimistic this year. And I think Northwestern fans, and it'll be the theme that we talk about today, as a bunch, the Northwestern fans kind of mirror the players right now, and we're just salty. And I think we're sick and tired of, like last year, for whatever reason, Northwestern has a abysmal year, and everyone like harkens back to the 1980s when the program just sucked, and fans are tired of it. And so I think, people forget 2 years ago, this team went 8-1 in the Big Ten, right? Ohio State went 8-1. Like, yes, we lost non-conference games, but we also, to Notre Dame that year. And we always have a terrible loss. We had a terrible loss to Akron that year. And so to your point though, it's a top 20 defense every year in, year out. And this team is defensive oriented, and the wild card has been the offense. We had a new offensive coordinator coming in. Fans have been wanting one for years and years because we became very predictable. And then obviously quarterback play was the demise last year. Northwestern's been pretty good at quarterback for a really long time, solid, and then to get Ramsey was huge. And so once we got Peyton Ramsey, there was some optimism there. Offensive line has really improved in the last couple of years. And so the pieces were there, but I think realistically in an 8-game schedule, optimists were saying 6-2, 5-3 kind of a thing. So it pleasantly overperformed.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think I watched Northwestern a bunch this year. I think they're a very good football team. They're always well coached. They're fundamentally sound. But, it's just, I don't want to say it's reality, but perception for sure is that, this game the spread is, I think, close to 21 points, 20.5. I saw earlier and I think Ohio State fans, they look at the Big Ten championship a couple of years ago. The score was probably closer than the actual game was. I think Northwestern made a nice little comeback at the end to make it somewhat close. Last year was obviously a blowout in Evanston. But I guess the question I want to ask you is, what are the reasons that this Northwestern team could be different than years past? Why should Ohio State? I mean, I'll tell you this, Ohio State players and the teams and the coaches is not going to overlook Northwestern, but why should Ohio State fans take this Northwestern team as a serious threat to Ohio State's hopes at a Big Ten championship and potentially a college football playoff berth?
Well, I think if you look at the matchup, to me, it's strength on strength, right? Like 2018, I think that's where the narrative's different. And this is why Northwestern fans are pissed off, right? It's like, it was midway through the third quarter, we were down 3 and had the ball. And Dwayne Haskins, just the big difference between this team and that team is the secondary. Dwayne Haskins just blew just over the top, right? In that game, Ohio State pulled away, just beating us deep. This is the best secondary, definitely in 25 years, and most would say all time. I mean, it's legit, NFL caliber talent back there. Greg Newsome, lockdown corner. I believe he's No disrespect to Sean Wade. I think he's the best cornerback in the conference. We'll see on Saturday. But it's secondary play, which is lights out. And that's been the biggest surprise. We knew we had a really good corner. We have a freshman safety who stepped up and, all Big Ten, and Brandon Joseph. And so if you look at, you guys have, it's not the X factor. The biggest advantage in the game is you guys have a Heisman quarterback, right? And so if you look at that, and then I think also we look at it and say, your weakness is your secondary, right? I mean, if there's a weakness in Ohio State,
Absolutely.
and we're not going to beat you over the top, but Peyton Ramsey can throw the ball. And the thing that's most intriguing to me is we have not seen, I don't know how Ohio State's weather's been. I mean, obviously, but probably the thing that's been most interesting, and that's not reported, I think 4 of the last 5 games he's played in games that have had 20-mile-an-hour plus winds, right? And so the game has been dictated to like short passing. We haven't had an opportunity to really unlock the offense in part because of the weather. So I think that's something that our receiving core is always assumed to be, and we don't have game breakers, right? They're not game break, but they're very good. We're going to do some disguising. And so I think those would be the 2 things that I would look at and say, look, I mean, we have the number 2 scoring defense in the country, right? You guys have one of the top offenses in the country. So it's really, it's really interesting matchups for me. That's what I would say. But if I had to pick one, it's Master Teague is great. Your line's always good. Our run defense is solid, but our pass defense is tops in the nation. It's number 1 ranked in the country.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how maybe less talented, but very fundamentally sound team who's well coached and plays very well within the system goes up against more talented team that, I would say is inexperienced, less experienced, and has had, I don't want to say they're not well coached. That's certainly not the case, but they have just had some lapses in performance at various times this year. I think because of their inexperience, especially on defense, the offense has looked pretty good. So it will be interesting to see, how 2 teams who have very different approaches to going about their business kind of perform this weekend. Let me ask you. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, a couple things there too, right? And so this isn't the first rodeo. We were there 2 years ago. Northwestern was happy to be there, right? New thing. You guys are there every year, right? And so there are a ton of guys that played in that game that are back, right? There's good, to your point, it's not going to be 80-20 or 85-15 Ohio State like it was 2 years ago. It's going to be empty stadium. And so I never thought I'd see the day where I was actually excited to see Northwestern play Ohio State in a controlled weather environment, right? Normally speed would go to Ohio State in that regard, but I actually think it's to our advantage because of like I said, the passing game. But keep in mind, Peyton Ramsey, last year did not play that well against Ohio State. Flat out, you can look at the stats. 2 years ago, played extraordinarily well against, Ohio State. And so there's another thing. I'm a big believer in guys who've played the same laundry multiple times. Like there's no intimidation factor there from Peyton Ramsey. He's not going to be worried about the name on the front of the jersey. He's been there against this team. And so, and this team has a enormous chip on the shoulder, as does Fitz. Like the lack of respect. They're on social media. They're reading Sean Wade saying, we have to blow this team out, right? There's no one in the country giving Northwestern a chance. No one. And that's, they watch this stuff. They watch, even Alabama, people saying, well, assuming they beat, there's no one saying assuming Ohio State. Is Ohio State in when they win? And I think the other X factor here that Ohio State fans may not know about is, this Mike Hankwitz, the defensive coordinator, just announced he's retiring. He's going for win number 400. This is the win one and these guys love him. They've had Northwestern's been lights out in the second half. No one's scoring on them. And so to me, it's about, keeping it within a 1 or 2 score game at halftime. And then I don't know what it is about our defense, but we are adjusting in that second half and just annihilating teams on D.
Yeah, Ohio State has not traditionally been a good second half team this year. They've been lightning fast starters in the first half. went up, I think it was 35-3 on Rutgers, only for that game to end a little bit closer. They were up 35-7 on Indiana. And that game ended up 42-35. So,
Right.
there's that is definitely something to watch. Is how's Northwestern adjusting? What's the score at that point? Is Ohio State better in the second half? It's mostly been on defense, but that's definitely something to watch. Now, these two teams have had two common opponents. Nebraska, Ohio State, I think beat them. Forget what the score was, 52-17, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Northwestern beat them 21-13. Fine, no big deal. That happens. Transitive property is not, to me, in sports, is not valid. But Northwestern's only loss was to Michigan State, 29-20. Ohio State played that same team in their last game 2 weeks ago, minus 3 starters on the offensive line and at least 3 starters on the defensive side of the ball, and beat them 52-12. What happened in that Michigan? Like, that's a pretty big, 52-12, and then losing 29-20. Again, transitive property does not matter. As you said, there's so many things, so many variables, intangibles that go into this game. You get an extra level of juice and chip on your shoulder and all these things that go into it. We see upsets in college football every single week, and Northwestern is absolutely capable of upsetting Ohio State. But I want to know what happened in that Michigan State game where a team like Northwestern, I forget what they were favored on. They were definitely at least a 2-touchdown favorite.
13.5 point favorites.
Yeah. So they were about a 2-touchdown favorite, and they end up losing by 9. What happened in that game?
So I think this is so 2 things. Number one, they laid an egg, right? This was Ohio State Purdue a couple of years ago. We laid an egg, and the team actually admitted they underestimated their opponent, which sounds preposterous for a Northwestern team. But you got to remember, they were number 8, undefeated, right? Like, they had 3 games in front of them, and for the first time, Northwestern controlled its own destiny to go to the CFP, right? It was like, holy smokes, we're going to be heavily favored the last 3 games and face Ohio State. And, holy coat, we could be number 5 going into that game, right? And so, I honestly think they got a little cocky. 2 things happened actually in the game. I mean, they went down 17-0. Here's the Northwestern trend has been, they were down to Iowa 17-0 in the first. So Northwestern has started horribly in games this year, just horribly. Miscues, slow on defense, and it was the same thing there. And ironically, I just was kind of like getting salty defending the secondary. There was one cornerback who Rocky Lombardi just picked on, got 2 beautifully thrown balls. He went like 12 for 27, but in the first quarter threw 2 beautifully thrown balls, totally torched the same corner. Our corner got pulled, our guy went in, and then we locked him down the rest of the game. But, it's tough to, when you go down 17-0, it's tough to dig a hole. And it was one of those games that's like, okay, they're coming back and, fumbled. We had a huge fumble going into, we're up 3, had the ball with a chance to kind of go put the game away, and we fumbled, and Michigan State came down and hit a couple field goals. So it was, it was a debacle. They laid an egg. And, I think the guys will tell you, especially since then, everyone's written Northwestern off, and it's kind of gotten their juice back a little bit, but it was a horrible game. It's up there with one of the toughest losses in Northwestern last 25 years from my perspective.
Yeah, for sure. It would have been awesome, this game being 4 versus 5, basically a playing game for the college football playoff, and Northwestern ultimately guaranteed a New Year's Six bowl, even if they lost. So, but this is still a good game. I want to talk about this game a little bit. Let's talk about the Northwestern offense first. What are the strengths? What are their weaknesses? Who are the players to watch on the offensive side of the ball?
Sure. Biggest question, I'll start with the weakness. Biggest question mark has been running back play. Offensive line is very good, anchored by a freshman, Pete Skoronski. He's one of the highest rated linemen in the country. He was only named 13, but he will be a high level NFL draft pick. Started every game as a freshman. Pass protection's been good. Peyton Ramsey, very good game manager. Doesn't make a lot of mistakes. Not a cannon of an arm. There's been some question of whether he even got hurt. In the Michigan State game, he was flat out terrible in the first half. He was floating balls, and to the point where people were wondering if he was injured. So very solid receivers, right? Northwestern's top receiver actually left last year. He's now Bennett Skronik. He's a starter and starring at Notre Dame right now. But veteran group at wide receiver, nothing flashy. They don't drop passes, right? Like they make plays and a lot of yards after catch. We have a tight end transfer from Florida Atlantic named John Rain, who's Peyton Ramsey's favorite receiver. I actually think Northwestern's strength is when they roll out. When Ramsey rolls out, we're really good to when we roll. Our line is very good getting to the edge, getting to the boundary, and creating things in space. By far, the weakness has been running back. Isaiah Bowser, Ohio guy, who starred in the game 2 years ago, he got injured. He's not been himself. Drake Anderson, and both of those guys have had key fumbles and sat. Interesting last week, third and fourth strings, it was Illinois and it was a depleted Illinois. So it's like pump the brakes on getting too excited. But Cam Porter's going to start. He's a non-traditional Northwestern running back. He's a Cincinnati kid, 5'9", 215, lower the boom. He's kind of like a traditional Ohio State, Wisconsin, Michigan State kind of running back. He put up like $143 last week, and people are really high on him. He's a true freshman. But, I mean, our running game has been wildly inconsistent.
Yeah, and that's the strength of the Ohio State defense is stopping the run. So, something's got to give there. Usually it's a team that can control the clock, and whoever wins the rushing game and the turnover battle and things like that usually ends up winning the game. So that could be, if Ohio State can't stop Northwestern on the ground, I think they could have a lot of problems this weekend.
There's an element of Northwestern's going to run just enough to keep it honest. They're going to pass. This is going to be for us to win. Peyton Ramsey's going to have a big day and, move the ball. I think the bigger difference here is our offensive coordinator is much better at. Former players would tell you, like, opposing teams were able to, under Mick McCall, could call out the plays. Can't do that with Mike Bajakian, who came from Boston College. He's very creative, disguising, right? We'll run pro sets and then do something out of it. So I expect it to be kind of an up-tempo, pass-happy game that's a little bit more old-school Northwestern offense. But, we've struggled. Our offense has not – we've been very efficient in the red zone. If we get to the red zone, we score. But we're not like a explosive by any means. And so I don't expect Ohio State – I don't expect Northwestern to get over 100 yards rushing on the day.
Yeah, for sure. Talk about the Northwestern defense, though. To me, this actually could be the key matchup is, can Northwestern basically, they probably won't be able to stop Justin Fields in the Ohio State offense, but can they limit them enough for their offense to outscore them, when that final whistle blows? Tell me strengths, weaknesses, some players to watch on the defensive side of the ball.
Sure thing. So, like I said before, the strength of this team is the back seven. The linebacking core, we haven't talked about them. All seniors, Patty Fisher, the leading tackler in the NCAA, Chris Bergen, fantastic player, Blake Gallagher. They call it the Irish law firm, Gallagher, Fisher, and Bergen. All three guys, top 7 in the Big Ten in tackles. They're the heart and soul of the team. They're very Fitz-like, smart, don't make mistakes. Secondary, like I said, is just super talented. And they have a chip that you're not used to. We've talked more smack for a Northwestern team than I've ever seen, especially out of the secondary. It's kind of fun. It's like, oh my, what is this? The clear weakness is the interior of the D-line. We've been nicked there a little bit. We don't have a ton of depth. And you've watched it. I mean, each team is coming, running right between the tackles. And that's been the hard part, is kind of like our line getting hat on hat. Our defensive scheme is predicated on our linebackers filling gaps at the point of attack because they're pretty versatile and athletic guys. We're not a big pass rush team, right? So, and Hankwitz is a very conservative guy on defense. I mean, and Northwestern, Justin Fields is everyone's nightmare. Northwestern traditionally has just flat out sucked against really mobile, multidimensional quarterbacks. And so that's what we would be scared anyways, but it's particularly bad. I mean, you asked about Michigan State. That was the other thing. They completely stunned us with Rocky Lombardi tucking and running like to the edge. And our defensive ends were not holding contain, and he was getting to the edge and gashing us for yards. And we kept thinking, he hadn't done that all year. And so, I mean, it's going to come down to, that's the whole point. I don't know how you contain Justin Fields, and that's what makes him so multidimensional. Like that run he had, that touchdown he had against Michigan State is the thing that scares the hell out of me, where it was like he was doing circus acts trying to catch the center snaps, and he was at the 2-yard line. He ran like 30 yards horizontal I see that. It's like, okay, I think our best shot is kind of what we saw in the Indiana game where, if we can get some picks, have him he makes a couple decisions, bad decisions, the secondary will make him pay for it, but we just can't give him time, and we can't let him run free. And that's obviously no one's been able to stop that. So, that's the part of like, what would make you think that we could do it? I have no evidence to say that we could stop him in that part of the game.
Yeah, let's wrap it up here. Put it on the line. How do you think this game plays out, and what's your final prediction?
I think it's going to be similar to the 2018 game in that I think Ohio State will start quickly. We'll have a good first quarter. It's been, like I said, I think we'll start chipping away in the second quarter, and then, just lost the lights. Lights went out. Hopefully that's not. I think it's a one possession game. And I think people think I'm crazy for saying that, but I've looked at Ohio State and there's not a lot of body of evidence. And to your point, there's a lot of inexperience there on the defense. And so I'm hopeful that, hopefully we can pull it out. If I had to put money on it, I would say it's probably an Ohio State by a touchdown type of a finish, which is going to surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I tend to think Ohio State, I think some people maybe took Shaun Wade's comments the wrong way or a little out of context. I think he meant, they can't leave a doubt. If they win this game, they can't leave a doubt in the committee's mind. They need to not only just beat Northwestern by 7, they need to come out and make a statement. And I think Ohio State, that's their mission here. They want to come out and make a statement. I think if they win, they're in. I don't think I think it win by 1 point and it doesn't matter, especially with Florida losing last week. That was a big piece for Ohio State, but I think it's going to be interesting. It's to me, it's which I need to dig into this more for my prediction. I think Ohio State is going to win. I'll give it Friday in our Buckeye Scoop stat picks. Which Ohio State team is going to show up? Is the team that was still missing guys, but still put out a tremendous defensive and offensive performance against Michigan State going to show up? If that's the case, yeah, I think they cover that 20.5 point spread because that was their best game of the year. Right. Despite, some of the guys are missing that they now have back. If they come out and they play like they have for really the other, they're 5-0. I mean, I would say other than Nebraska, where they started slow and then picked it up, the other 3 games in between those, they started really fast and ended really poorly. If they play like that, I agree with you. I think it could be very much like 2018, and it could be within reach for Northwestern in the fourth quarter. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. But Jay, we really appreciate you joining the show. Everyone, go follow him on Twitter at Lake the Posts. You can check him out also at lakethepost.com. I'm sure they'll have great stuff heading into this weekend's game. They're always a go-to resource for me when I'm looking into Northwestern. So Jay, really appreciate you joining. Thanks for all your insight and knowledge.
Thanks, Alex.
Good luck this weekend.
You too.
This episode of Around the Oval was brought to you by Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. If you've been thinking about refinancing or buying a house, check out our sponsor, Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. They offer low rates for refinancing and home purchase loans, including first-time home buyer programs, down payment assistance, and cash-out home equity loans. Check out revolutionmortgage.com/tpennington.